Listen, I know I don't compare it to a puppy play date, but hopefully we get somewhere close to it here.
No, we will. This is better.
All right, listen, I didn't say it, you did. That's gonna be on my tombstone now. Better than a puppy play date. So I guess to start, I gotta start with everything going on in social media because when Big Brother contestants leave the house, some people choose to say like, "Listen, I'll watch the season in my own time, in my own space, etc." You and Taylor make the decision. Pretty much, you all watch the premiere together, but you have been going through the season. I think you're up to what, like episode 14,
Yeah,
15. So yet to get to, of course, your downfall, but
yeah.
what ultimately prompted the decision for the two of you to decide to go into this watch, especially so soon after everything had ended?
I think a lot of it had to do with one, the fact that we are, as people who live in two different states, we are granted the luxury of being together right now. So we
Mm,
did acknowledge the fact that if we don't do this now, we could obviously, link up and do it later. But the fact that we're here together now and we're supporting one another, that was one of the factors into considering to diving into the season. The second one is throughout interviews and podcasts, a lot of the season is being referenced, and we've been given asked for our thoughts on a lot of things we're not necessarily educated or informed about. So we didn't want to address things or make comments not having a full and informed decision. So with those two factors, and a lot of it also had to do with both of our emotional stabilities, to make sure watching the season. I know some other cast members and previous alum have still not even watched their seasons. So we both just kind of felt like we were pretty well situated. We're here to support one another, along with, we're still going through interviews, we're still going through podcasts. So it would be productive to, know more rather than less when addressing certain circumstances. So we just both came to the conclusion that I think we can, in small bits and pieces, that's why we're only on episode 14, start to watch what occurred.
Now, the interesting addition to that is your choice to do it live, pretty much,
Yeah.
right? To almost stream your reactions, which, listen, Big Brother fans definitely appreciate. I've certainly seen things to the extent of like Big Brother 24.5, almost
Yeah.
getting to rewatch the season through your eyes. But again, to the point you just made, and especially what you've just recently been watching, right, with things like the Daniel blow up, there are some incredibly emotional and personal things specifically for Taylor. How do you weigh that choice to sort of, I mean, for playing such a public game where people were watching you 24/7 to continue that sort of public voyeuristic perspective into watching people watch you watch everything back in a manner of speaking?
And I think we did it more for ourselves and the fans because
Mm,
we enjoy the support and the love that they do have. So it almost was like it was almost comforting knowing they're there after living with them for so long. It's almost like it's like the live feeds from the house. And from a fan perspective, Taylor and I do love to engage and support the fans, and I felt like it offered a lot of clarity. We've received so much. The first time we did it, there wasn't much thought process to it. It was just like, I think it wasn't even our idea initially. Someone went live when the whole cast was watching, and we saw like, the fans loved it, and we love to make them happy. So giving them that perspective and that opportunity to engage with us is, I think, something Taylor and I really appreciate. So we thought, they loved it. It gives a little perspective on our ideas, and sometimes if I see something or she sees something, it gives us the opportunity to offer a little clarity. Like, unfortunately, the edit isn't it's 24/7 footage to a like a 45-minute episode. It's hard to get everything that happened and everyone's perspective. So we definitely thought it was an interesting choice. I obviously wanted to make sure Taylor was comfortable with it. And I don't even know how it came about. Just one time, I think it was her. She was like, should we go live when we do it? And people loved it. And it was reciprocated with a lot of positivity and love. So we were like, why not?
So, listen, I'd have like my press pass revoked if I did not ask for the jailer update. And something I really want to bring to the table, though, is you have talked about in other interviews how you're like, oh, yeah, we saw the jailer hashtags and we're loving it. And listen, I'm seeing some stoking of the flames right there in a manner of
Yeah, of
speaking.
course.
Taylor wrote something interesting, though, on Twitter in the past couple days. Joseph is an amazing person. I love the jailer stands down. but I hope everyone can still see me as an individual who overcame unbelievable odds to achieve a monumental accomplishment for the BB franchise. I am not defined by my adjacency to a man, which, of course, I think you and I both completely co-sign. But
Oh,
I'd love to sort
100%.
of, yeah, I'd love to dig into that a bit more. Coming from where you came out of the house over the past few weeks, both getting acclimated to the real world as well as the Big Brother fan base, which is almost a different world in and of itself. Have your opinions changed to the point where that statement was stated?
So I can't speak for Taylor directly. She did obviously share her sentiments about the tweet. It primarily being that she felt initially like, and I agree with her. Taylor has changed history. She beyond the
Mhm.
BB franchise in my tweet and response is like, to be the first, black woman to win a regular season of Big Brother along with AFP. Like that is monumental in so many aspects beyond reality TV. So especially considering the story she had, so I think her what her thought process was doing, and of course I'm sure she can elaborate on this further, was just that in certain interviews or in certain podcasts, like although she broke history, the primary juice of the conversation was her relationship with me, which is
Mm.
obviously extremely important to her and something that she definitely loves to talk about. But I don't think so freshly after what she just did wanted to be her primary reason for being contacted or anything of that nature. So I just felt like there might have been, and I agree, there should have been more dialogue around what Taylor Hale actually did in regards to the game. And I think she thought like a lot of she loves the jailer stuff. She
Of
jokes about
course.
it all the time. But I think she just wanted to make sure that that wasn't undermining her accomplishments and her monumental achievements, which I completely agree.
Totally understandable, and I agree with as well. I know that at one point, it was also vocalized that the two of you were going to be pursuing therapy, both I think separately and together to sort of walk through the Big Brother process, which again, to a point we made earlier, is not necessarily something that happens with a lot of alumni. Talk me through that choice to have the willingness and the openness to be able to do that, both again individually as well as a pair.
And absolutely. And Taylor and I have spoken about this continuously. We don't see therapy at all. I was going to therapy before the show just to check in on my mental health and make sure everything is, good. As someone who struggles with ADHD and anxiety, I was definitely already doing that. So that wasn't really a new implementation for me. I don't want to speak for Taylor because I'm not too sure where she stood with it, but we definitely don't see therapy as something that should be, only associated with trauma or negativity. We just want to, it's like as simple as being like, oh, I'm going to go get a physical and check in on my physical body. We're both very big on like, it doesn't hurt to go check in on our mental the mental characteristics of our mind. And that being said, considering we played a social game where perception and reality is warped for 3 months, we didn't think it would be, counterproductive to go get ourselves, have those conversations and get checked a little bit. So it was a very productive and open-minded discussion, and we didn't see anything, abnormal about it. It was simple. It was truly as simple as like if I went and did a physical competition and then was like, I'm gonna go to the doctor to get checked out to make sure everything's good. We're doing the same approach with our mental.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I completely agree and co-sign. I think it's very timely as well, considering we just had National Mental Health Day. I mean, in
Yes.
general, now that you're sort of on the other side of this experience, again, you can only talk from your personal experience, but I think certainly members of your cast have talked about their own mental health struggles and perhaps using it
Yes.
as reasoning for what they may be doing. Again, I don't want to necessarily ask you to put words in their mouths, but what do you make of certain members of your cast, talking about their own mental health struggles in the house and how that might have led to them doing, for lack of a better term, certainly unsavory things in the pursuit of $750,000?
So I obviously cannot speak for my other cast members. All I can say is for those, my mother struggles with mental health issues, which is why it's a near and dear topic to my heart. And I know it can definitely have its difficult times. I've watched it. So I cannot speak for any of their decisions, any of their thought processes. I have no idea what they're going through. And why conclusions were made or thought processes were reached. So all I do is wish them the best. And, I hope they get better and they prioritize their mental health, and that, a productive and positive outcome results at the end of this.
Yeah, so I want to go back to obviously watching through the season because you have been watching some absolutely epic stuff happen so far, including, the formation of the leftovers and everything. What is one perspective that you were not privy to in the house, either from your allies, I would say like from your enemies, but you were playing both sides. You were allied with so many different people. But what was one perspective that you were seeing via either conversations or DRs that has surprised you the most through these like 14, 15 episodes of the show?
I think like affirmation, like definitely getting some, knowing that my paranoia was a little well founded. I did assume, because obviously no one came to me and said there's a full girls alliance until later on in the game, or post pack is a thing until later on in the game. So watching myself early on, I'm a little concerned that these are occurring, and then actually seeing the perspective of them occurring is a little, reassuring in a sense, because I would have felt extremely bad if I felt like I was on the, like, tail end of the house, and that was just my paranoia getting to me, and that there weren't these alliances, and post pack was never a thing, nor girls, and that, I just overthought everything. So watching the perspective of what was going on in the house while I wasn't necessarily associated with those conversations is definitely interesting. um but overall, I would also say another thing is just like where Taylor was truly situated in the game. I mean, I really didn't know it to be to that extent while I was in the house. I definitely did not see that. There were a lot of conversations, obviously, I wasn't a part of or made aware of. So that was another thing to be a little shocking about, is seeing where she was truly situated, which makes me even more happier, and think she's more deserving of the win she had, because I didn't think it was as, difficult as it truly was watching it.
I know you've said in other interviews that, when your goal was always to get the leftovers down to 7, and then from there you want to sort of like pare down the onion in a manner of speaking, right? Like you had your
Yeah.
ideal 5, 4. At the time you had left the game, if had everything gone right in Direfest, did you have an ideal final 2 partner, or were things still relatively open for you?
So things were staying definitely open to me, because, even in the yard, we had like final 2 talks, and all, like, people are saying what they need to do, but the twist forced a final 5 and a different game. So all circumstances under there were just being paused until we could get back in the house. So I would say right before the twist, in the trajectory I'm going with Taylor, she's very likely to be my final 2. But, obviously then the twist occurs, and that throws the whole game for a loop. You're playing a completely different game, basically. This isn't regular Big Brother. This is now a final 5. This is someone who wasn't, a direct target now being targeted. There's no privacy in the yard. So, your typical secret conversation, Big Brother hiding, is not occurring. Everybody can see everyone in the yard. So that was like a whole nother game I was going into. So then, coming back into the house, I would have loved to like just reassess everything and see where everybody stands, and then go from there. But I think, obviously leading up to the twist, I was very hot, starting to set in stone with Monty and Taylor, at least to being my final 3, after, you know, however things play out.
So actually on that note, it has obviously been talked about, very understandably so. The comments that Kyle had made while what you found out in the jury house, the cookout 2.0
Yeah.
theories of it all. I want to talk about a different side of it, perhaps. I want to talk about the Michael and Brittany side of things, because it was certainly vocalized in the house, and I would imagine the jury as well, right? The timing of those comments being dropped, of the fact that it had happened a couple of weeks prior. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. You haven't gotten to these episodes yet, but it had gotten to the point where I think Michael and Brittany and Kyle had certainly sort of been like babysitting you and Taylor and Monty to make sure that, the 3 of you weren't all together alone in the same place at the same time. Can you talk a bit about your reaction to sort of the strategy behind those comments being outed? And I can imagine how complicated it was as well when you find these things out, and a week later Michael ends up walking into the house.
Yeah, I mean, granted, from a game perspective, I was close with Monty and Taylor, and I did want to work with them. So from a strategic standpoint solely, I can see the concerns because Monty, Taylor, and I, just as players and as people, and within that parameter, we're definitely, at the time, I didn't think Monty and Taylor were so close, but at least to me, if you wanted to take a guess of who I was close with, it wasn't hard to see. So those concerns with me, Monty, and Taylor, and the babysitting, I could see it from a game standpoint, just because, like, I just mentioned my final three would have likely been us three. But I haven't really dived deep into the comments or seen the episode. So any opinion further would, not be very informative.
Yeah, totally understandable. Well, I want to move on to a brighter topic to end things. Let's talk about representation. Certainly a large reason why you wanted to come onto the show. You were only one of a handful of Middle Eastern descended house guests to come on. You got the pleasure of meeting King Kaser
I
only a few days
did.
after you
He's
left the house.
amazing.
Not only that, something you mentioned before, and I think something that unfortunately was a bit remiss to be broadcast was your sort of like lifelong diagnosis of ADHD as well, which
Yes.
I can certainly imagine had, from a neurodivergent perspective, a lot of affect as to how you ended up playing this game. You've talked a lot about all these well wishes and outpourings of messages that you've received upon leaving the house. Talk a bit about, people from those communities. I'm sure they really loved seeing someone like you getting to tell those stories on screen when there are unfortunately more now, but definitely still few opportunities to do so.
Yes, and one thing I would say that there's a common theme from both communities is normalization. That's exactly what I always get. And just from an aspect, like, it's so much thanks for just, they were like, your personality, a lot of your thought process, the way you act, or like, is just so normal to me, and maybe might not be normal to others, but we understand you, Joseph. Like, and thank you for putting that out there and normalizing it. Brittany from last season, I'll never forget, came up and thanked me, and she was like, thank you for speaking about the ADHD. Thank you so much for just, normalizing it. And I appreciate her so much because she did that same thing for her season. And similar with the Middle Eastern community, they were like, thank you, Joseph. We know it's not easy to get onto media. And, it's so nice and refreshing to turn on the TV. And when we see an Arab, it's not in a negative light. So they
Mm,
were like, thank you for that. There are so many messages. Those really touch me sincerely. And they're like, you don't know what you did for my kid, like watching you the whole
wow.
season, or, when I say your name in Arabic, or vice versa. When I get so many messages about ADHD in school, the fact that I was able to manage through it and what advice I can give. And it's just, so reassuring to know that people who shared the same struggles are me are benefiting from watching me and my story, and just me playing Big Brother as a whole. They were like, so many of your small mannerisms we noticed, the way you speak, the speed at which you speak, your pacing, like, it's all things I have that I feel so uncomfortable and weird about. And I want to normalize it for them. I'm like, if pacing helps your thought process, then do so. If you speak relatively fast because your brain is processing everything, at a higher speed, then that's perfectly fine. Like, just let people know, let people be aware, which is kind of why I shared those things on national TV. I was hoping, just to give the house guests, and a lot of times I forgot I was on TV, but just to give a perspective of who I am as a person, because it can be overwhelming dealing with, we're all people from different backgrounds. So I just thought the more information I provided of who I am as a person, the easier it would be to understand me. And I think so many people appreciated that and resonated with it. And that is probably one of the most beneficial things I got out of this game, is just like those messages where people are like, you don't know what you did for me as a person. And
Wow.
I appreciate it so much. Those messages always warm my heart. And those messages are more important to me than any amount of money.
Yeah, that is incredible. And I mean, look, the old adage is right. When as a plant, if you open up your leaves and your petals more, it lets you take in more sunlight. And I can imagine from
Absolutely.
yeah, and I can imagine from your perspective how difficult it was, right, to like air out everything that you have been through to get to where you are in front of millions and millions of people who may be behind a keyboard judging you. But I think it reflects well the general, I would say almost unanimous positivity that I've come across for you. because of what you've been able to do, is because you've been able to show your true colors, and those colors are beautiful, man. And I just want to thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Of course, listen, I know I'm a voice in the crowd that's been expressing this over the past month,
Yeah.
but but thank you obviously for everything that you have brought, either, before, during, after the show. I know that the world is wide open for you. I know you're not entirely sure where you may be going next, but I know no matter where you're going to go, you're going to bring that heart to it, and it's going to be absolutely fantastic.
Thank you so much, and I really do appreciate that. And one thing I would like to point out is you guys are not voices in the crowd. Every voice is individual and every voice matters. And I promise I cannot get back to each and every person, but I do try to. Like, every person I touch means the world to me. And if there's any way I can try and recognize that, I want them to, because I'm a person just like the rest of everybody else. And whatever platform I'm on, everyone is just as important as the next. And I really want to prioritize that and make that happen. So the biggest thing I can do is I'm just trying to show my story, and then people similar to me, I'm hoping can resonate it, and some positivity can, leak out to the story that is Joseph Abdin.
Well, so far so good, man. All right, well, I will let you go. I know you got a bunch of other interviews and other places to gallivant around on
Thank
your
you
on your
so much.
journey. Thanks so much again, man. So nice meeting you, and enjoy
So
the rest
nice
of your
meeting you.
day.
You too. Thank you for the interview. It truly was a pleasure. You're amazing, Mike. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, man. Take care. Have a good one.
You too. Thank you.
Bye bye.